I don't think the St. Lawrence Seaway has been used the way it was thought of during the Eisenhower administration. But the reason that products move from Windsor right out to Halifax is because the lakes are frozen, and some shippers like the fact that it goes right out to the Atlantic. Passenger ships that come up to the Great Lakes seem to stop in Windsor and not in Detroit, so the passengers go off and shop probably on that side. The other thing, the location of Michigan, I think we ought to think about geographically as to how we can serve the rest of the country. When you go down to Ohio, all the warehouses for the trucks and everything is down there. They obviously would not be here in Michigan. So the other thing is, when you go into a bank in the Detroit area, try to buy a Canadian dollar. And we have made it very hard for Canadians to convert their money into our money. Whereas when you go to Canada, it's very easy. Everywhere, everybody knows about it. And so I think all the bank, what I was told in one bank in Detroit, I said, do you have any Canadian money? And she said, no, nobody has turned anything in. So they only used the money that was brought into them. And I think that's a mistake. The last thing is a question. I was reading in the New York Times the other day that the Chinese are now poised to lay tracks because they see that we want to go through railroading and stuff. And they're ready to build it. And my question is, why can't we build trains in Detroit or around Michigan? General Electric or General Motors. I don't understand why we have to, you know, be second to them. We can build all that stuff. In fact, the United States became famous for its trains in the early part of the century.
We would be a real proponent to just simply leave the tracks in Michigan that we have on the ground for transportation rather than ripping them up, which has been the trend of the last 20 years. I think it's significant that developing countries, both China, India, and Southeast Asia, are building rail, and we're ripping it up. There's a message there. We need to maintain that rail infrastructure, and and the stuff that's still there is deteriorating to the point that it's a lot of it's 5-mile or 10-mile-an-hour track. Huge issues, and it's a real problem. The difficulty we have in Michigan is one of the reasons that we love to live here, however. We're a peninsula. Tough to have very many through trains from Sarnia across to Grand Rapids and across Lake Michigan. And that's what's causing, unfortunately, much of that demise of rail transportation in the state.
Here in the U.S., vis-a-vis the EU, our rail network is actually more privately owned, exclusively privately owned, across the United States. So the economies of scales of building and maintaining new rail is an order loser for many small rail companies. Whereas in the EU, you have subsidies and state-owned rail networks in many countries in Asia, including China and Japan. So it's more of a national priority. At the same time, however, you have more freight and passenger traffic on the rail as a mode of transport in those same regions of the world. So it's a value proposition, and to some extent perhaps a culture shift that's required.
And the other piece that's significant in Europe, there's a major barge network for transportation that largely displaces a lot of that need for rail, which is water movement, which is cheaper than rail, and a whole lot cheaper than truck.
I have a question, but maybe you guys know the answer, but I read where China's trying to lay out a whole rail system in Africa, and it's supposed, I don't know too much about it, but I just read it, but obviously they're very aggressive in this area of controlling transportation.
Anne-Marie, this is a subject for a second session, but I spend a fair amount of time in Africa, and there's a tremendous amount of development going on in Africa by both Far Eastern countries, China, and many other countries to actually look at acquiring or leasing or using large tracts of land in Africa for food production. Food security is a huge issue going forward. It's a major concern. And that's why they're laying out that transportation infrastructure to move those commodities, both inputs, fertilizer, in to produce the crops, and then the crops out once they're produced. One of the classic examples, one of the best production regions in the world for agriculture is the Ukraine. There's absolutely no transportation infrastructure there at all except dirt roads. So it has never achieved, in the modern history, any ability to help feed the world. And it's because of no transportation infrastructure and logistics. And that's why they're building in Africa.
Before you, I just want to say real quick that even though it's hard to tell from my comments, I am a Democrat, but I'm not a firm believer that government has all the answers. I believe that government, I think Jim mentioned it, but we talk about all these things, but really it's going to be driven by a healthy economy. And if we don't have a healthy economy, government, we can help create the parameters of how you operate, and we can fine-tune the environmental sides of it and provide that. But in general, you know, we have to have a healthy economy to do that. So we can create some of the things here and there, but in general, all that money is going to come because private sector wants to invest in the state. And if we don't have that, you know, we can put all the different kind of ideas we want out there. If we don't actually have that private sector money in the state, we won't be on the global map. So we've got to figure out how to create a healthy economy, period, in the state. So that's, so I don't want you to think I was saying that government has the answer, but we can at least jumpstart some things. But I don't think we can actually do it all. I kind of.
Yeah, just 2 points. The first point is going back to some of my earlier comments. Some of the data that I've had the opportunity to look at in some of my own research. If you look at according to the International Monetary Fund data, the workers' compensation and remittances, that is the flows of money that foreign workers living and working here in the United States send back to their home countries. And I'll just pick 2 countries. China is $120 million a year. Japan, it's about $80 million a year. Vietnam is about $22 million a year. So this is money going back to families and relatives back in those emerging market countries. So in my view, I believe it creates a demand pull signal. They're going to do something with that money. The question is what? And small, medium, and large firms have an opportunity to tap into those consumers because they're going to get a cell phone and they're going to look on the internet and see what's possible and see what brands are out there, and they're going to make a consumption decision. Secondly, going back to the China issue, China is really buying up capacity in Africa. And in my view, I think China as a country is bringing the infrastructure with them and laying the track. At the same time, I believe, and to their credit, many of the policymakers within those African countries have finally realized that although they are a good source of raw materials for many firms, including China as a country, they've understood that we could actually benefit not only by providing access to those raw materials, but also by having those foreign entities come in and help us build the infrastructure. So if I'm a small firm here in Michigan and I'm looking at what China is doing in Zambia or in Malawi, for me that says, well, geez, I wonder if I have business opportunities in Malawi or in Zambia, given that the infrastructure quality is now on an upward trend. So I think we need to think about changing the paradigm into, you know, here's a competitive threat, but at the same time, it's a competitive opportunity. And there's a word for it in Chinese, and I think it's Wingji, or Wingjia, I believe. Threat and opportunity is crisis. So, I don't know, just a caveat.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question regarding supporting manufacturing infrastructure here in Michigan. I live in Muskegon County, and in Muskegon and Flint and other cities, we've lost a lot of our manufacturing centers. But we have brownfields, we have areas that are ripe for investment. And so are we working through the MEDC and through some of these other businesses to help build the new fruit processing plants, to locate more of these green jobs into some of the centers that were thriving manufacturing centers, but now you have people out of work who are looking for the next job and trying to get training. But how do we start to plant those businesses in Michigan in conjunction with our international partners?
Can I just touch on it real quick? But in my comments, I mentioned most of the major deals, and I can't speak specifically to agriculture. I don't know as much about that. But at least from what we did on the battery, for example, the Muskegon one we just did, which was the 4.2 plant, which is a battery production plant, went through my committee, and actually, it was my bill, actually, and forgot. But that was a combination of a U.S. company with a German company and a company from Switzerland. And these deals, like Jim pointed out, are so much easier to do with multiple countries, because one country might be the venture capital group, another country might have the intellectual property, another company might actually have the infrastructure to lay out the actual manufacturing side of it. So these partnerships are actually, the MEDC is doing a good job in those areas. We're very fortunate. I did another bill that came through committee was the Dow Cocoa, which was also a Korean company. And there's another one, LG, I think, that's on the west side of State Holland. That's another Korean company, I believe. Or is it Japanese? I can't remember.
Korean.
It's Korean. It's Korean. And so we're actually doing it, and as long as the U.S. doesn't have a lot of capital right now, obviously, it's not unusual for the U.S. to leverage itself with other countries to use their capital to help fortify this country. And it's been done historically throughout all of history. This isn't like a new phenomenon. It's just, people get all worked up about it sometimes. But in general, if we don't create our own wealth, we have to help use other people's wealth. It's just like the way a mortgage works. So eventually we pay off the mortgage and we own the property at the end at some point. So I really don't think we're doing too bad. We're probably not going to make everybody happy, and the MEDC can only do so much. And frankly, previous job, I was the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and I did more with the MEDC prior to this job because they had more resources at that time, and the economy was better in Michigan, so they could do more things. So it's a challenge either way you do it. And but I think we're trying to do as much as we can. Like I said, the German companies, they come here. I don't think we do an active program to recruit them all. They just sort of have natural relationships. That's I think that's more the manufacturing side, though. I don't know, Jim, anything else? Ag.
Well, in food processing, we need to create an environment that's conducive and attractive for food processing companies to locate here. Bill Knutson's sitting back there nodding his head a little bit, but we need to make sure that environmental regulations are consistent with competing states, which in many cases currently they're not. We need to make sure that we value food processing as an enterprise. We've lost more food processing in the last 10 years than we've gained, unfortunately. But that's an arena that there is tremendous opportunity.
Close it up there. I have a whole list of next year's forums because this is the last forum of the season. But I think, we've seen what the forums are supposed to do. This is a good example, and that is to constantly keep the information flowing both ways, identifying possibilities, opportunities, and challenges, as Professor Ross said. And I'm just so pleased at the talent that we've been able to bring to this forum, both in the audience and on the panel. It's quite phenomenal that we ask these people to take a few minutes and come and really focus on some of the key challenges facing our state, people who have dedicated their lives to some of these issues, and really do not ask for much in return. So a huge thank you to this panel and all those who came before you for making it just a real successful year. Of course, I have to point out my director, Doug Roberts, who's right here. He directs the Institute for Public Policy and Social Research. Thanks for a great year. And we will post the presentations on the website.